McCartney.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that presentation. In my country, the NEET are described as the ticking time bomb because of the potential social strife that could be generated if and when they rise against the state because of unemployment. There are two things I want to ask from you. One, have you picked up any adaptive strategies that the NEET employ to sustain themselves? And secondly, are you seeing a growth of an informal economy within Europe as a result of the failure of the formal economy to absorb the youth? And if so, what is the nature of that informal economy? And is there any thinking by the European Union on how to probably not only regulate, but also promote participation in that informal economy rather than seeing it as an illicit sort of economic practice?
Sorry. Sorry for your name. I'm sorry. Please?
Yes. I get just part of your first question, actually, on the adaptive strategy of employers.
No, adaptive strategies of the needs, the not in employment, education, and training persons. How are they adapting to being there? Are they just passively unemployed and not in education, or are they creating avenues that are alternatives for them?
Well, I think that one strategy that we have seen to adapt to the situation is, in some sense, to try to exploit the single market for those who can. We have seen and observed since the beginning of the crisis that a lot of young people has left country of origin in order to go where the opportunities are. In some sense, this generation is the first generation that can exploit fully the single market because they know languages much more than the previous generation, and they have Ryanair, which permit to fly across Europe very cheaply. So try to match the geographical mismatch and going from a country to another one was a strategy, an adaptive strategy that was followed. But of course, this requires also means. It has cost, and these costs are basically also emotional to leave the place of origin. Then others try to find their own way, try to invent their own jobs. Although in Europe we have the culture of apprenticeship is probably need to be better developed, or also the reputation of apprenticeship is not like there is in the US, for example, and there is a kind of failure. I mean, failing is not seen as can be in the United States. These can bring also to kind of bogus self-employment. So forms of self-employment that are quite precarious, and to informal economies as a solution to arrive to meet the ends. Actually, there is not a common strategy on regulating the informal economies, and I would say that for the moment it's still seen as a problem and more than an opportunity, for example.
Juan Jose.
Thank you. I found your paper very interesting, particularly as regards education, the role you give in the paper to education and the role that in the public policies is gaining education. In Latin America, we have the problem that many youngsters find secondary education as meaningless. It's part of a crisis more general, not addressed just to the issue of education of labor market. It's part of a meaningless problem that also reaches other spheres of life. But practically, in Latin America, we also have had sort of distance between education and the labor market, education and the firms, etc. In Europe, on the contrary, there has been a tradition of more vinculation between the two spheres through vocational education and training, what you mentioned repeatedly in your paper. My question is, I do agree that this could be one of the better policies in order to try to solve these serious problems of needs. My question is if you have some data, ideas, or elaboration comparing the European countries in which the dual system has been more developed with the other ones, and is in the countries with more successful dual systems, the situation of needs is better as regards employment. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. And yes, we have. And it's not just restricted to countries that have vocational educational training, but all the countries in which young people acquired early labor market experience as a part of vocational educational training or as part of Sunday jobs or Saturday jobs, but early labor market experience, even though limited, even though not related to the educational curricula, the entrance in the labor market is very quick, much quicker than in the rest of the countries. The reason is probably that this early labor market experience allow young people to acquire norms and values of work, which then employers, when the educational trajectory is completed, will reward, because this young person already know how to behave in a company, how to behave in the labor market. In Europe, actually, we have different systems, educational systems. For example, yes, in these countries is, as you said, combining education and labor market, and this drive to a quicker entrance to the labor market. This, for example, in average in continental Europe, it takes 3-4 months for each young people to enter in the labor market after completing education. In South Mediterranean countries, where we have a system that is study first and then work, where the share of young people who combine work and education is marginal, is around 7-8%, even before the crisis. It can take up to 10 months to find the first job. So there is a link and a closer connection between employment and education will be probably the most efficient way in order to have updated curricula in secondary education as well, and then a culture that permits young people to acquire early labor market experience in order to have a prompt and quick entrance into the labor market when the education trajectory is finished.
Very much. No more question, but we are late. No? Ah, sorry. Zagmani?
Thank you, Massimiliano. Very, very specific question. Why is it the case that in Europe, because your paper is specifically addressed to the European Union, not enough has been done so far to utilize instruments of social finance, such as social bonds, such as social lending, in order to cope with the problem of nets? Because we have created, for instance, the youth guarantee. But that is a rather bureaucratic business, which costs a lot, and, and the youth get any... Why don't they use the same money to create a sort of a guarantee fund in order to allow these people, young people who wants to start a new business, to have fun, because these people have no access to credit, to form credit, and so because they have no collateral to give. And so they are rationed in the credit. The other aspect, why not considering agriculture, the return, but by agriculture I mean the modern type of agriculture. Agriculture is a sector which is labor intensive. And in certain parts of Europe, there is a return to agriculture by the needs. And the results are very promising because these people enjoy, they produce, they gain some money, etc. Why not incentivizing more at the European level this type of return to the new forms of agricultural activities? Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. Yes, the youth guarantee costs a lot. It costs a lot, and it has been financed just marginally by the European Commission, and the responsibility of implementing the youth guarantee and to finance the youth guarantee was then of the member states. Member states that had to implement a very complex system, a very costly system, in a period where they all suffer austerity and budget cut. And this was a combination that was not optimal at all, I would say. There are controversial results regarding the youth guarantee. At the European level, 14 million of young people had an opportunity, and for 5 of them was, for 5 million, was an opportunity related to the labor market, was a work experience. However, the impression that I had by evaluating the first implementation of the youth guarantee was that several member states were more interested in the guarantee of an opportunity to satisfy statistical indicators and to reduce unemployment than the guarantee of an outcome. Because guaranteeing an outcome is much more expensive than guaranteeing, is an investment, but is an investment. But in order to satisfy and to decrease the statistics that were exploding, the impression was that in many members the focus was on guarantee of an opportunity so that the rates drops. Regarding implement their own idea, I think, and so as the first part of your question, more related to why not entrepreneurship, for example. I think that this is quite important, it should be fostered. However, I have a concern that is not just the concern of the funding for entrepreneurship, but is in terms of skills. Have these young people the right skills to open a business and enter in the market? Because this can be very dangerous. For example, the Spanish government has, as the first part of the crisis and the first implementation of the youth guarantee, invested a lot in youth entrepreneurship. And a big pillar of the Spanish implementation of the youth guarantee is on young entrepreneurship. It was replacing the unemployment benefit in a way of subsidies for youth entrepreneurship. But if this money is given to someone that has no idea of how the market works and how to draft a business plan, this can be dangerous because the person can receive economically scars by losing money in an already not very good situation. So I think that it's important to invest in entrepreneurship, but it's also important to invest in entrepreneurial education in order to make young people, first of all, better entrepreneurs of themselves, so to be proactive and better entrepreneurs from themselves, and then persons that are able to translate their own and creative ideas in good business plan and good companies. Because these young people that has a lot of problems in entering into the labor market in Europe has unique skills. They are digitally native. And so there is also with this also entrepreneurship trajectory can put them in a position of translating these unique skills in good business idea. And finally, regarding agriculture, I think that agriculture is one of the main chapters of expenditure of the European Union. The problem that I found sometimes when dealing with young people was that they didn't want to go to work in that sector because they have higher expectations. Sometimes I found that has been inflated by messages provided by media, provided by us, by family, that they can have the work of their dreams in 1 second. And this, so I found sometimes reluctance, even though for young people who are unemployed, to work in certain sectors, such as agriculture sometimes.
Only, please.
Thank you. It's great to have the experience of EU. In fact, in my place, Hong Kong, we also face this serious problem of youth unemployment. I have 2 questions. The first one is many people criticize, in fact, nowadays the university education simply could not match the needs of the society. Even though some university graduate, they have high education background, but they could not find job, particularly those from pure science or humanities subjects like history or maths or physics. So I would like to know your views about the matching. The first question is about the matching of our existing curriculum with the so-called societal needs. And the second question is some young people, in fact, complain to me from time to time because I teach in university and I come across young people very often. They complain that now they do not have the upward mobility like in our previous generation. And in fact, they complain that the older generation blocked their way. So in a sense, they argue that, why don't you guys retire earlier? So I would like to know your answer to this second question. Thank you.
Yeah, the matching of the curricula and labor market needs is an important one, in the sense that we have observed in Europe an increase of young people who is getting their tertiary education, and the population of new graduates has increased strongly in several member states. However, sometimes there have been also increased kind of educational curricula that were not linked sometimes with the labor market needs or demands. Because at the moment we are living in a society where the labor market needs are shaping the needs of the rest. And actually there are a lot of young people who completed the tertiary education that received their degree, and they felt to be ready for entering into the labor market, which actually cannot find their way if not in sectors that are completely not linked with their studies and with jobs that that is a struggle to define them decent, actually. So, of course, I think that curricula should, I mean, is from both sides, I would say. I mean, I think that young people have to be free to follow their own passion and study what they really want. But when they decide what kind of educational trajectory they want to follow, they need to have a full set of information regarding also the consequences of their choices. So a knowledge of the absorption capacity of that curricula in terms of labor market entrance. On the other hand, I think that it's also important that curricula are then updated more quickly than sometimes it happens, especially those where new technology may have a strong impact, actually. In terms of mobility, you asked me before why they are not moved earlier. No, yeah, sorry.
The retirement age policy, could it asking the older generation to retire earlier so that you leave room for the younger generation to move up?
Okay, sorry. I thought about the geographical mobility. Regarding the retirement, there are some studies that in the OECD is one of the main authors in these that show that the countries where there is a higher participation rate, a higher employment rate among older workers are those where the youth unemployment is the lower and the employment rate of young people is also higher. I think that this can be an interpretation. There can be an effect. There can be an effect of retiring and then to entering the labor market. One thing that we can say is that there is not a perfect replacement. Not for all older workers that retire. A young person will take their job, actually. So this link is not justified. Is not justified because there won't be a perfect replacement. Not for all the professions, actually.
Last question, Vittorio.
A very short question. You spoke about mobility. When the euro was introduced, people objected that the disappearance of flexible exchange rates made only sense if we had a strong mobility, and that this mobility is not likely to occur within the European Union because of the lack of a common language. How much is the language acquisition in early age relevant to increase mobility and therefore decrease unemployment?
I think that in a continent that speaks 22 languages, different languages, and try to be a union, language acquisition should be a fundamental pillar of our educational curricula. I don't think that this is happening. This is not happening, especially in certain countries. There have been improvements, for sure, but this is not still happening at the level that it should happen in order to ensure better use of the European Union and of the tools that the European Union can provide, especially, for example, the single market and the mobility, where actually the language is a barrier. Because one thing is to go to work to Ireland, actually, and English is quite well known. Another thing is go to work to Germany, for example, where German is not taught or spoken by many young people. But of course, in these, for example, in Germany, there are a lot of programs where, together with induction course in a new profession, the person that arrived from abroad is also provided a language class in order to make it integrated, actually. This does not happen in other countries, for example. But this is very important. However, the question of the mobility is seen as a success and a failure at the same time. Because, of course, from one side, we can see that the mobility is the success of the European single market. From another side, some young people that have to move in order to find a job, some people leave this as a deportation because they don't want to leave their own country. And of course, it has a cost. It has an emotional cost. It has an emotional cost, this for sure. Especially also in an union that is not like the United States. We all speak the same language. Here we are trying to become an union, so it takes more time. Although I think that the new social media, for example, has helped in order to reduce this distance, and they play an important role. Thank you.
Senor Sanchez, Rondo.
What about the problem of the young people that we don't have? Because today, especially in Italy, there are not too much young people, because no growth. The effect control.
Thank you. This is a tremendous problem. The demographic change is a tremendous problem. In some countries like Italy, and in my region, for example, Tuscany is one of the regions with the lowest share of young people. Population is getting older very quickly, and with a shrinking workforce, without even the capacity of integrating in the labor market one of the smaller cohort, which is young people. But this creates quite a lot of concern and problems in the future, which I don't see the most bright as possible as part of this of the demographic change. In some sense, I mean, we fail in integrating into the labor market. We have in Europe actually 90 million. I mean, without the Great Britain, it will be 85, 88 millions of young people, age under 30. And we have a huge problem in integrating them into the labor market. In the next 15 years, these 50 millions of young people, young Europeans, will enter in the labor market, age 15 to 29, against more than 1 billion of young Chinese and young Indians, which will arrive into the labor market very skilled, because the top 5% of them is equal to the entire population of young people in Europe. And this will be the competition that the new generation will have to face in a world that geopolitically is changing very quickly, also in terms of economic balance. So where are the young people that we don't have? And it is a big problem that our young generation will have to face in the new world.
Thank you. And now.